So Paizo offers a lot of different advice to storytellers about how to improve and expand upon your games, and one of the things they note for Downtime Mode is that it's perfectly acceptable to add a sudden and unexpected encounter in the middle of Downtime Mode to break up the action a little bit. Because no one expects the Spanish Inquisition! Paizo, we want the Inquisitor class. That's what I'm saying here. Let's take a look at the advice that Paizo gives Game Masters for Downtime Mode in this episode of the Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I am the Local Disaster Tour Guide. That's right, I'm a storyteller who knows that the more things change, the more things stay the same. In other words, no matter what your PCs do, there is still going to be an elite team of paladins that is hunting them down to bring them to justice for their crimes. It's unavoidable. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome back to Storytelling in Pathfinder 2e, a series where we take a look at the tips, tricks, and advice that Paizo offers storytellers to help us improve our Pathfinder 2e games and bring some more excitement to our gaming tables. This series is intended for storytellers of all skill levels from beginner to advanced, and even if Pathfinder 2e is not your main game, I still invite you to be a part of the conversation. Over many years, I've learned that studying a variety of games often exposes us to interesting ideas that we can bring back to our preferred game, so regardless of how long you've been storytelling or what game you prefer to play, I invite you to be a part of the conversation. Today, we're continuing our discussion of Downtime Mode in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Downtime Mode is one of the three main modes of play in Pathfinder 2e. They are Encounter Mode, Exploration Mode, and Downtime Mode, which is the mode that we have most recently begun to explore. Last week, we took a big picture look at the purpose of Downtime Mode and some of the major things that it offers, narratively speaking, according to the Pathfinder 2e core rulebook. Today, I want to follow that conversation up by taking a look at some of the pieces of advice that Paizo offers in the Game Mastery Guide specifically for Downtime Mode play. Now, in future videos in this series, we will be taking a look at the different specific rules elements associated with downtime play, but my goal from the last video and this video is to really help us understand the big picture of Downtime Mode so that we understand where it fits and how to use it well, and then we can see how the mechanics support using Downtime Mode in play. If you're looking for some references on Downtime Mode, you can check out pages 481 and pages 500 to 502 in the Pathfinder 2e core rulebook, and most relevant today, you can check out pages 22 to 27 of the Game Mastery Guide for Pathfinder 2e. And specifically what I'm going to be doing today is I'm actually going to be taking the bullet point list at the beginning of the downtime section from the Game Mastery Guide and talking about the major pieces of advice that Paizo gives in that bullet point list. These are some of the biggest ideas that they give storytellers, and so we're going to talk about them and what they mean. And I'm also going to be adding the first major paragraph header because I think that that topic also fits in here really well. So today we're going to talk about how to demonstrate change in your setting, how to emphasize the planning that your PCs do, minimizing roles in downtime mode, bringing back compelling NPCs and plotlines, interjecting events or scenes that might be interesting for your players, and evaluating your group's interest in downtime mode itself. But before we do all that, let's do the YouTube stuff really quick. If you enjoy this video, like it, share it. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. And most importantly, please leave your thoughts, comments, and observations in the comment section down below. I love this community and all of the feedback that I give. I love hearing from you guys, and it is one of the big things that helps drive me as a content creator. Yes, it feeds the algorithm, but it also encourages me. I want to hear from you. By the way, if you're looking to support this channel, you can join my free Discord, or you can check out my Patreon, both of which are linked in the video description. And speaking of supporting this channel, let's take a moment to hear from this video's sponsor. So I want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of today's video, ArcKnight. ArcKnight is a Texas-based company that makes beautiful and durable die-cut plastic accessories for TTRPGs, such as flat plastic minis, object sheets, spell templates, and the number one reason they keep getting a lot of my money, RPG maps. ArcKnight sells a number of double-sided map packs that you can use for your TTRPGs that come with different themes such as wilderness or planar settings, or as you can see here, the Greystone Castle pack. Let's bust out these maps on the table and show you what they look like. So really quick, I'm going to show you one of the sample layouts that they give you for the Greystone Citadel. As you can see here, you have a moat and an entrance area. You have some basic fortifications for the castle, and even a throne room for your players to enter. Now the next thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to step back a bit. This is one of my old RPG maps, and you see the standard folds, crinkles, creases, and other wear and tear that is associated with your standard RPG map. But as you can see, my maps from ArcKnight are actually much flatter and in better condition, and the reason is these maps don't fold, they just store as is. This leads to a more durable product that gets less wear and tear as it ages. Also, I would like to zoom in and show you something really cool about ArcKnight's maps. As you can see here, I am one of those weird storytellers that likes to use hex grids instead of square grids. And the cool thing about ArcKnight's maps is you can custom order these maps in whatever type of grid you prefer. Do you prefer the normal square grids? You can order it that way. Do you want to custom order all of their maps with hex grids like I did? That's a possibility. And even though I don't have an example here, you can also order their maps completely gridless if that's your preferred playstyle. And to give you one more sample of what ArcKnight maps look like, here is a recent construction that I used in one of my games to create a tavern for my players to explore. As you can see, the map is colorful, has light sources indicated, and once again, allow me to point out that they allowed me to order it with a custom hex grid to fit my group's gaming style. So that's just a sample of the many different maps that ArcKnight offers. I love that these maps are beautiful, that they're durable, and very easy to store. These simple plastic sleeves tuck very neatly beside my computer desk and are very easy to store and access for my games. I really appreciate the fact that ArcKnight develops products that are easy to store as a game master, meaning that I have more room for, well, all of the other stuff in my gaming space. One last thing I'd like to say about ArcKnight is the incredible respect that I have for their team. I have been a customer of ArcKnight for years, backing many of their Kickstarters, even talking to them at Gen Con, and I have placed many orders with this company. And on the single occasion that there was an error with one of my orders, their customer service team worked quickly and efficiently to get that order fixed and sent back out to me. I'm impressed by their professionalism and by the quality of products and services they provide. So if you want to check them out, I encourage you to check out the link to their website in the video description. And thank you again, ArcKnight, for sponsoring this video. So, as I mentioned in the opening of this video, in the Game Master Guide for Pathfinder 2e, Paizo gives us a bullet point list of some of the important things that a storyteller should keep in mind when they are using and running Downtime Mode. Now remember, these are kind of big picture things that you want to keep in mind. Some of the more mechanical and nuanced topics will be covered in future videos, but the first thing that we want to talk about today is demonstrating change to your setting. So in the previous video, we talked about the purpose of Downtime Mode, and we talked about how narratively Downtime Mode serves to progress the story. It's about pacing, it's about moving the story forward, and offering a sense of change or development to what is occurring inside of your narrative. When you want to highlight drama, you slow a story down. But when you want to highlight progress, you speed a story up, and that's exactly what Downtime Mode does. For Downtime Mode to be narratively satisfying, your players and the characters they are controlling should see some, change in the world around them. There was a time for me as a storyteller where I wasn't very good at this. I was really good at crafting interesting fight scenes, interesting monsters, and creating tense scenarios that my players had to deal with, but then the space between those encounters was, to be honest, kind of dull, and for a long time I didn't know how to make the space between fight scenes more interesting. And I'll admit this sounds really simple, but one of the things that made the space between fight scenes so boring in those old games was the world didn't change. The world was this static, unchanging, unmoving place, and yes, there were interesting fight scenes that would pop up, but then everything else just kind of sat there. Change is the measure of progress. It can be bad change, it can be good change, but if you want a story to feel like it is moving in any direction at all, there needs to be change. And to be honest, this is another one of those things that it took me a while to learn as a storyteller. Your players feel like their actions are more meaningful when the world changes around them. And so one of the things you want to be mindful of when you're running Downtime Mode is the world needs to change. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be grandiose, although there is certainly place for big and grandiose changes, but it should feel like the world is moving. It should feel like the world is different from one point in time to another, and that sense of change will help your players become immersed in the world because they feel like the world is changing around them and they're seeing something new as time goes on. Here's a simple one that I've honestly been working on recently as a storyteller: changing the weather and changing the seasons. It's actually kind of embarrassing, but for a long time, the majority of my games kind of just always assumed it was late spring. The only time that I had truly hot environments was if I sent my players to a desert, and the only time I had truly cold environments was if I sent my characters to the tundra or something like that. For a long time, I didn't have a sense of the weather and the seasons changing, and I was kind of amazed when I started including this concept of a changing of seasons, of moving from fall to winter, winter to spring, spring to summer, summer back to fall. Giving that sense of progress just to the calendar actually helped my players invest more in the setting. And that's just a very basic way that you can change a setting. You can certainly use these things for important narrative beats. For example, a character might need to gather enough military allies before spring arrives so that they can launch their campaign on time. The changing of seasons can certainly have a narrative importance, but even just that simple action of making the weather change in my games caused my players to take the story more seriously and become more immersed. So as a storyteller, one thing you want to do is you want to ask, how is the world changing as time moves on? Are new stores opening? Are old stores closing? Are there new politicians rising to preeminence? And has a war broken out in a neighboring country? Maybe something as simple as a new celebrity bard entering the area could be used to show a change in the environment and ultimately help your players feel like the world is in fact changing around them. The next bullet point that Paizo gives us is that as a storyteller, we should emphasize the planning that our player characters are doing and the fruits of those plans in Downtime Mode. Now, I and many other storytellers out there may wonder at what Paizo is getting at here. Do player characters actually plan? That seems a little strange. But, on the off chance. Okay, so all joking aside, we've talked about the purpose of Downtime Mode is to progress the story, correct? Well, progress implies that the story is going somewhere, or more bluntly, that your PCs have a goal of some kind. Now, that goal is obviously going to change from story to story, campaign to campaign, table to table. Maybe your PCs are raising an army, maybe your PCs are just trying to make it through the school year. It could be a lot of different things, but theoretically, your player characters should have goals, and they should be pursuing those goals in an active fashion, even though downtime is moving through that timeline relatively quickly. Downtime presents a wonderful opportunity for your players and the characters they are portraying to actively plan for the big, important things that they want to do. Are they hunting down a particular evil dragon? Well, they could use that time to research ancient tomes that might reference said dragon, or they could call on contacts to help them acquire more powerful weapons that might be useful in the battle. They might call upon diplomatic skills to help recruit allies that will join them in the fight. There are a number of different things that your PCs might do to plan for an upcoming portion of the game, and as a storyteller, it's just good practice to ask characters what their plans are and how they are using downtime to prepare for the important things that their characters would like to do. But I think Paizo puts a particularly important point here, in that you want to emphasize the planning that your PCs do and the fruits of the planning that your PCs do. In other words, if you want your player characters to do something other than run in screaming without bothering to think about their actions beforehand, you do want those plans to feel like they had an effect. If your PCs take the time to plan for something, then that plan should bear some fruit. I have unfortunately seen game masters, thankfully not too often, but it does happen sometimes, where PCs will plan to do something, and the game master comes in and just cuts down whatever it was that they planned to do, and honestly that feels bad for everyone. Now, I'm not saying every plan should go perfectly every time, that's obviously not the case, but as a storyteller, you can use downtime to encourage your players to plan, and to reward them for taking the time to plan. And that's going to have benefits both for the narrative and I think for the overall success of the game you're running. The next point that Paizo gives us on how to run downtime mode is they say minimize the number of dice rolls that you call for when running downtime mode. Now, there are essentially two reasons why this is important. One of them Paizo spells out very plainly, which is if you call for too many rolls during downtime mode, you're going to bog down the speed of play. If the purpose of downtime mode, narratively speaking, is to progress the story, and you keep slowing down the story to ask for a whole bunch of dice rolls, you're kind of undercutting the purpose of downtime mode. You're obviously going to want to call for skill checks, you're obviously going to want to call for some dice rolls at different points during downtime mode, but you want to be mindful as a storyteller that frequently it's better to err on allowing the story to just kind of progress along whatever the assumed track is and only call for the really essential skill checks or dice rolls. However, there's a second reason that you want to minimize dice rolls during downtime mode, and this goes back to something we discussed in the previous video, which is downtime mode is a low to no threat mode of play. Encounter mode is high threat. Your PCs can die because monsters are trying to kill them. Even exploration mode still has an element of threat because there might be a hazard or a trap right around the corner. But downtime mode is not intended to be especially dangerous, and certainly is not intended to be lethal for your PCs. Narratively, downtime mode is a lighter mode of play that assumes a more common chance of success, assumes a more common chance of progress for your PCs, and very rarely should player characters be significantly hindered by something that occurs in downtime mode play. If there is a real threat that it is going to throw off a player character or potentially harm a player character, downtime mode is not the best place for those roles. So when you think about calling for a dice roll in downtime mode, you want to, number one, pick out rolls that are going to be important to the story, but also you want to pick out rolls that, if your players fail the roll, they can, as a lot of Game Master advice offers, fail forward. The story can still progress, the character can still move forward, they just might not move forward with everything they were hoping to. A good example of this is crafting weapons. You have a dragon hunter who's trying to craft a new dragon hunting spear. If they fail the crafting check, they might not get their new spear, but they can still go hunt the dragon. The check is relevant, but it is not completely detrimental to the character's progress in the overall story. The next point that Paizo gives us is probably the most entertaining point in this entire video, and that is use downtime to bring back compelling NPCs or compelling plot lines. And this kind of goes back to that first point we had about demonstrate change to the setting. The world should be changing around your characters, but another thing to bear in mind is the characters in the story should be changing around your PCs as well. Maybe the party's favorite tavern has made enough money that they're able to build on and open up a much larger establishment. Maybe one of the PC's best friend gets engaged and invites the party to a wedding. Maybe a former villain has cleaned up his act and is now working a respectable job down in the city square. Showing your PCs how the other characters inside the game world have changed over time can, as we've said before, help with the immersion for your players and make the story feel more compelling. And let's just be honest, every storyteller out there, you have a list of NPCs that you love and your players love, and come on, you're looking for an excuse to bring them back. You know the players are going to have a good time seeing them again. You want to roleplay them again. Downtime mode is the perfect time to do that. Last video we talked about how downtime mode is supposed to be one of the modes of play that really supports your PCs just having fun, and it can also be a mode of play for you, the storyteller, to have some fun too. Bring back those fun NPCs. Bring back those plot lines that, maybe the players solved the problem, but here's how things have played out since then. Have some fun letting your players see the other major people and points of the story changing around them. It's something that groups love to see, and honestly, downtime mode is the best place to do it. The next 2 points that Paizo gives us on running downtime mode, I actually want to talk about them together because I kind of feel like they're touching on the same thing, which is breaking up downtime mode with short events, short scenes, maybe even dropping into encounter mode or exploration mode, but just kind of changing up the pace a little bit and not driving the story too fast. Now, we've talked about this with some of the other modes of play. In encounter mode, the focus is on slowing down the story to ramp up the tension, but even in encounter mode, you still want to play with that balance, and you want to speed things up, slow things down. You want there to be some give and take to the progress of the story. Well, the same is true here. Downtime mode is focused on progress, but you don't just want to blast through the story full speed. You want to break things up. You want to pause. You want to have moments for characters to reflect. You want to give the story a chance to move at different speeds and to do interesting things, and part of making downtime mode interesting is giving breaks to downtime mode. So if your PCs have decided to open their own store, maybe drop in a few scenes of them interacting with some of their customers, or interacting with some of their suppliers. Maybe have a scene where they come in one morning and catch a thief trying to rob the store and give them a chance to interrogate the thief. You can even drop into full encounter or exploration mode from time to time to help break up the speed of downtime mode so that you aren't just glossing over everything that's happening. Now, I think the key to these interjections is pretty simple. Downtime mode is intended to be low to no stakes, and any scene that you interject, I think you want to keep the stakes similar. If the characters have to deal with a thief, they'll probably be dealing with a simple street thief, not the head of the Thieves Guild. That would be more appropriate to maybe exploration or encounter mode play. You want to keep these scenes and even these shifts to other modes of play at a similar level of stress, at a similar level of stakes to what the players are expecting with Downtime Mode. The goal here is mostly to play with the pacing of the story, not to play with the stress level of the story. But interjecting a few scenes, interjecting a few interesting events, is a great way to make downtime play more meaningful, more engaging, and more memorable for your players. And then the last thing I want to talk about, this is something that Paizo goes a little bit more in depth on in the Game Mastery Guide. They talk about determining your group's interest in Downtime Mode, because the reality is some players are going to really like Downtime Mode and other players aren't going to care at all. As a storyteller, you want to adjust your story to something that is going to be engaging and comfortable for your group. As an extreme and exaggerated example, asking your players to run an extensive and mechanically detailed new business might be an interesting plot arc for you, but if your group's not interested in the minutiae of having their own shop, you're probably going to bore them if you throw that into the game. Asking your players what they're interested in is very important in determining how best to use Downtime Mode. Right now, I have several players who are very engaged with Downtime Mode play. I have one player who absolutely loves the new Battle Zoo Bestiary monster parts system, and their character is just all in on monster parts. And I have another player who's playing an inventor, and they have taken several of the crafting skill feats. Those two characters make heavy use of downtime and try to squeeze as much downtime out of every game session as they can. My party bard right now is using downtime to write songs about some of their favorite NPCs. They also are getting a kick out of downtime play. However, there's also some players at my table that I know are less excited about downtime play, and I know if I spent too long on the crafting mini-games or the adding new bardic music to the setting, I know I could quickly lose those players' interest if I went too heavily in that direction, and so at my own gaming table, I have to balance the interest of my players who really enjoy Downtime Mode against my players that want to get back to the more adventure-focused aspects of play. There's a lot that goes into this conversation, so I definitely encourage you to check out the Game Mastery Guide. They give you several different things to think about, but the big picture here is this: as a game master, if you want to make good use of Downtime Mode, part of that is going to be talking to your players, finding out what they're interested in, and adjusting your game so that the pace of the story is something they're going to enjoy. But that brings us to the end of the bullet points that Paizo gave us for running Downtime Mode from the Game Mastery Guide. So, let me turn the conversation over to you. What do you think of these particular pieces of advice? Is there a point here that surprises you, or is there something in this list that you would really like to work on as a storyteller? Also, are there any other big picture pieces of advice that you would offer for a game master who wants to run Downtime Mode well? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, like it, share it, subscribe to the channel. You can check out my free Discord and my Patreon, both of which are linked in the video description. And I want to give one last shout out to ArcKnight. Thank you so much for sponsoring this video. But to everyone in the Disaster Tour Guide community, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.